Okay, we're live now.
Okay.
Hello guys, welcome to KHIDKI. My name is Aniket and I am hosting today's talk. It's a it's a great pleasure to have one of our alumni, Bismark Fernandes, who is going to talk about the making of a short film, Expend, and will share his knowledge of stop motion animation. So now over to Bismark.
Um,
Yeah,
am I live?
yeah, yeah.
Hey guys. Hi. Nice to have all of you over here. I'm Bismark Fernandes. I'm a stop motion animator and fabricator. Currently, I'm working as a junior model maker at Leica. Um and before this, when I was in Mumbai, I used to work with Bombay Design House as an animation designer. There, I worked on a couple of stop motion, mostly 2D, and a couple of stop motion spots as well. And in that, over there, I realized that I wanted to learn more about uh, stop motion, and after which I came to the United States to do my complete my masters in animation and specialize in stop motion. So let's get into the presentation. Okay. All right. So my film Expend was made as a part of my thesis during my master's program at Savannah College of Art and Design. And Expend is mostly speaks about. So, okay. Yeah, Expend talks about human utilizing resources and for their own needs. And I decided to use the medium of stop motion because stop motion is extremely tangible and tactile. And, and since it was a good medium to kind of figure out how the audience kind of visualizes textures or feels the textures on the other side of the screen. And that was a part of what my thesis was. I was exploring how to enhance the viewer's experience through textures and using realistic objects. And hence, since everything on the other side of the screen is actual objects, actual props or textures, it I felt it would be more relatable to the audience. And before I'm I'm gonna ask Aniket to play the film for you guys, and then we can get into the making of it after you'll watch the film.
Yes, yes. I'll play the film. Yes. So Bismarck, can you talk more about the film? Hello.
Oh, yeah. Is it pinned back?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been
Okay. Thank you. So my team mainly, since I was making it at the college, my team mainly comprised of students and mainly comprised of students from their undergrads and other grad students, and my professors who helped me through or learned the process and also guided me through the making of this. And so I even had an MIT alumni who basically was the co-producer. She helped me with getting Janvi Shah. She mainly helped me with getting the artist for the pre-production part of the animation, and I had like concept artists and the character designers basically work on part of the film. Then, since stop motion is such a collaborative process, like any other stop motion film, but any other animation medium, but at the same time, it does require a lot of model making. Like, so I had uh, industrial designers, then film. My DP had done her undergrad in film production, and I had a production designer basically make one of the sets, and sound designers, um, costume designers, and it was a mix of different majors basically coming together to make this together, and of course, animation students as well.
Mm.
So um, yeah, so when I started the film, I basically started with breaking down the animatics. So after I finished timing the whole film with my boards, and I made the animatic. So the animatic basically gives
का
you.
नहीं माइक बंद है मेरा कॉल क्या तो कैसा है
Oh,
क्या ढकलू पे पढ़णार का ढकलर पढ़ क्या ढकलर
I'm getting some.
yeah, yeah. I'll just mute this. Yeah.
Okay, so um, um, where was I? Yeah, okay. Breaking down the animatic. So the animatic will give you a lot of clues in building your puppets, building the sets, the range of puppet motion. So basically, how much is your character going to do the splits? Is he going to be sitting down? Is he will he be standing? And also the rigging points. So rigging points are basically whenever the um, uh, stop motion puppet is on set, we do give it some support, and by basically screwing like uh, a support structure into its hip or the back, depending on whichever side is away from the camera. And and that is very important because you got to build this before the puppet. I mean, you built it in the armature. That's the bone structure of the puppet. And then the facial animation. So how much is your character going to express? Is it going to be close to the camera? It's going to be away from the camera. Just you get a lot of clues in how much attention or how much work you got to put into each of these puppets. So like for my film, I had two puppets. One was the deer, one was the guy, and the man. I named him Oscar, even though he does not speak in the entire film. I basically had to. I just gave him a name. Then another thing from the animatic is you get how many sets you got to build. So this early on breaks down your time and your schedule. Even though during making of this film, I really went off schedule, even though there were many things that I thought would take less time, but in order to make it as good as I could, I had to spend more time trying to polish it and make it better. Another thing that you got to see through the animatic is hero props. So hero props are basically the main props that the character will be holding and what all they're going to be doing. So those, since they'll be in camera and everyone's going to see it, it needs to be it needs to be designed well, has to be the character needs to be holding it properly. So rigging points, or you got to think about all these things as you build it. So it gives you a lot of clues in the fabrication process, which is my specialty and I love doing. So that's why just having the animatic and even the color script. This color scripts is a good uh, cue for the DOP. So my DOP Laura, could start figuring out lights and gels and what kind of equipment we need, how the build is needs to be, so that she can like put her lights around that. So these were things that the color script also did help with. Now, now moving on to the puppet fabrication. I had a character designer, Stefania. She was another grad student, basically whip up these designs for me. I was really lucky to have her on my team because I gave her the brief and how basically what I was looking for in Oscar. And since it was like a post-apocalyptic and theme, I gave her some references and she whipped up these like in a couple of days, and she gave me pages of these. These are just a few that I picked, but there were pages of these, out of which I really like the one on the left, the one over here, and I liked a couple of things from the other designs, from which I asked her to incorporate it in the final one, which is this one. And you can see she did put like a mood board of all her inspiration, and basically him having a bomber jacket and his striped pants, leather boots. And from there, I started building the puppet. So one thing about stop motion animation is the 2D and 3D design will at some point change, because you're trying to put like there's an armature inside there. You're trying to have a lot of stuff in, like, so the eyes are going to be moving, face replacements, all of these things kind of affect sizes. So in my final design, you can see that the puppet head has increased because I had to fit those eyeballs. I wanted movable eyeballs in there so I could animate his eye movement, because I wanted him to have really an expressive face, and that, like, the moving eyeballs was one of the main criteria. Also, the face swaps was did build on or give a convincing expression. Another thing about the, 1 second, let me switch this off. Yeah. Another thing about the puppet build was, since the whole body was not going to be seen, I decided to make it out of foam. Now, foam is a material which does not give you a lot of detail. And since it was going to be covered with clothes, I decided to go that route. And also the hands are made out of silicone rubber. Silicone rubber, that's one thing the silicone rubber was mainly because it reacts really well. It gives a very like a flesh tone, and it looks like human flesh in camera. And since I was playing with textures and tactile materials, that was a good option for me to explore and use. And since the film did have a lot of close-ups of the hands, it was nice to have it in silicone rubber. Also, because silicone gives a lot more detail than foam does, and it looks more like skin and a little more convincing. Also, a sort of blessing in disguise was I made the hands detachable. So because I had to cast them separately, it worked in my favor, because then I could do shots where where I can just use the hands instead of using the entire puppet. Because you got to understand, these puppets have wire armatures inside of it. The more you move them around, there's more chances of the wire breaking over time, and you don't want the wire to break on you in the middle of a shot, because once it's broken and you take the puppet off the set, you cannot get back to the shot. You have to redo the shot. You started all the way from the starting. So the lesser you worked that puppet from the start, the better it is for you. So the idea is to get all the main shots done, all the uh, longer shots, all the important establishing shots, stuff that is that's going to sell all the characters in the frame the entire time. So those were the shots which I decided to do initially, and after that we moved on to smaller shots. At the same time, I had another animator work on the close-up shots, which just had the hands. So that way it was easier to get both the shots done simultaneously, like the full puppet and just the close-up shots with the hands. And here you can see in this one, there was, I have used the hand on a separate rig. And in that way, it's kind of easier, because when you're doing like subtle animation, it's nicer not to be moving the entire puppet and just the hand, when the hand's like slowly coming up towards his face. It was easier to control the hand separately and then animate him just in areas very subtly whenever required. And this is just a look at how I built the armature. I used polycarbonate my professor loved polycarbonate, and then slowly we all became a fan of it. Polycarbonate is bulletproof glass, and it was amazing to have like the armature inside, have like some polycarbonate in there where you could like tap threads in, and I could use screws. And also I made the armature in such a way that I could go, if at all any of the wires did break on me, I could go in, just unscrew the say the rib cage or the pelvis, and then change the wire. Thankfully, it did not break during the animation, and it worked out. But in case I just had that option in case anything did happen. So it's always nice to think of these options, because often you get some animators which are very heavy-handed, and they like to push the puppet as much as they can to get like really good animation. But that is bad for wire armatures, and also for ball and socket armatures. It's the same thing. The ball in the socket kind of start to lose their tension, and then you have to keep taking it to like at Leica we have something called the puppet hospital. So if a puppet breaks or anything happens, you can take it to the puppet hospital and they'll fix it, and you can get it back onto stage. Yeah, and this is another the molding process of the body. I made a plaster mold for the body. That's like a cheaper and a quicker way of doing it. Did not make a silicone mold. Also, even though the whole body was covered with clothes, I decided to have an actual body sculpt in there, because it does help when you put clothes on it. It does help drape on top of the clothes, and it kind of gives a sense of something in there, rather than just stuffing some foam in there, or just putting some sort of maybe just the armature. It does not really work out as well, because it's nicer when even the clothes get a much better definition, or the costume get a much better definition when there is some sort of mass in there. And also the mass has to be clinging on to the armature, so they all move together during the animation. And here you can see me standing on, so this was like a two-part like the expandable foam, you get it in like liquid form, you mix it together and it starts to foam up in so you have to like do this process really quickly and then stand on top, like pour the foam in there between the mold and then stand on top of it and then wait while the world passes by slowly. Yeah, you got to stand on it for like 20 minutes till it stops expanding. So that was interesting. And over here you can see once I open the mold, yeah, you always got to put Vaseline in your molds, because if you don't put some sort of releasing agent, your mold is stuck in there forever, like with the material. So that's one thing you got to, like, everyone's like Vaseline your molds or put in releasing agents. On the right, you can see the puppet with the rigging points. So, like I told you, rigging points are like support structures. Another thing is when you see that the character is going to sit, okay, there's something called as a butt rig. It's called a butt rig because it's literally a screw that's going up his butt. And there is one on his back. That's because he was going to sit on this high chair, and that way the screw in the butt rig and the back basically will pull the character down onto the chair, and you'll get that really subtle animation of the chair, kind of the cushion squeezing down. So in that way, it really helps. It also keeps the puppet stable in place, and that way it won't move, because in stop motion you want control of everything. You don't want anything to be moving on you during the animation. Otherwise, it's just going to cause unnecessary jitter. If that's your style, then I mean, it works. But for the style that I was going for, it really helped to have all these rigging points, so that way I could support the character while animation. This is another thing about the hands. You can see on the left, it started from a clay sculpt and then made silicone molds. This is the blue thing is silicone rubber, and you get a really nice with silicone molds. It does take every detail from the sculpt. Also, whenever we usually put Vaseline to release the mold, so otherwise it would all get stuck together. And you got it also sometimes takes in the brush strokes from the Vaseline, so you need to be like really careful while you're doing that. Just rub it all down, smooth it all out, and then cast the second part. And here is, it's not the final one, but just to give you an idea of what the armature looked like inside the mold. Okay. Now, this is my favorite part, making the head. So the head was really something that I had. This was like my third puppet head that I was making, and each time I made it, I tried to incorporate some more detail into it or make it a little more advanced than I made it earlier. And I had Stefania whip up like some expression sheets just to see the range of his face and how I could like sculpt it, just to get an idea. Then I went through the animatics, saw all the shots which had the puppet move, the facial expressions, and I did a quick animation in Flash, a 2D animation with Flash, taking her expression sheet as a reference, and started to figure like mouth pieces or mouth shapes I needed. I could have gone with the regular mouth shapes, but there were some shots where I needed some subtle movements in the mouth, like the mouth closing or the mouth opening. So for those, I had to, it was nice to have like a reference animation on the side and to guide me with the process. And again, there's another way of doing it where you could do 3D prints, but I did not want to get into the whole aspect of modeling the face, and then finding a rigger, a 3D Maya rigger, and animating the expressions, and then sending it to the 3D printer, and then cleaning up the face. Since I had already done this process before, where I do it in this two-part thing, I start with like the full faces, and then I shave it down to get these two pieces. And after that, I cast multiple, like I cast a whole army of them. And this is all the neutral expression. And after that, I use this thing called Propoxy. It's similar to MCL, and it sticks really well to the resin plastic. And it gives you like a 20-minute working time. So in there, I sculpted all the facial expressions referring to my 2D animation. And with this whole, like you can see all the gray parts are all the expression changes from the neutral face. So you can see over here the cheeks kind of like getting pushed up, where he's sort of like smirking, and over here adding an extra open to like the jaw going down, so some more material to the chin. Okay, and these are the final faces painted. And the adding the beard, the facial hair was interesting because I basically mixed Vaseline with some hair gel and put it on this fake fur, and stuck it onto the face, and then I was combing it and slightly trimming. So it was interesting, like to try and get it all consistent. And I think I managed to do it fairly decently. And here's a test animation of the face. During the animation, I was a bit disappointed after I did this, because you can see the goggles move a little bit. There's some slight chatter in the goggles. I thought I had done like a pretty amazing job in registering all of this, but then I showed this to the animation professor, and he was like, "It's fine. You can hide it during the movement of the puppet, and it'll be fine." Which it worked just fine. It was never an issue later. I was just overthinking at that point. Okay, over here on the left, you can see the eyelids. It was basically vacuum formed plastic polystyrene. And I made these eyeballs too for him. I cast a bunch of them because sometimes you get like air bubbles trapped in there. So it's nice to cast a bunch and then use the best ones out of it. And here you can see the eyelids, different variations of it. Some is like 15% closed, 25, 75, and then back to like 60%. And I just used it. It depends. I thought it was like pretty straightforward, but during animation, depending on how the head tilts, I use them in like different variations. Never really stuck to this pattern. It was all whatever I could see in camera. Okay, the deer fabrication was done by Naomi and Jackie. They are two amazing fabricators. They basically worked on it together while I had already started animating. And since I was animating the first shots of the film, it was nice to have them work on the deer puppet while I basically got shots done. It was a huge help. And you can see this is like the initial sculpt of the deer by Naomi. And then Jackie helped her make the mold of it. And they cast this in foam again. And then Naomi painted over. And you can see the final design over here. And then she added these extra details in styrene on top of it. And the rest all is all foam and the plastic head. For this shot, if you all noticed, I had the ears move, and that was a really good call by my professor. Basically, told me like, let's do that because it really sold that shot where the ears flicker, and I was a little apprehensive to like cut off the ears after it was all painted and then add a wire in there. But that I was really happy that he did take that call, and it really helped sell the shot of the slight ear flicker and the head tilt. Okay. Yeah. So this was the deer had to be cast twice. So one was for this animation for the one where he's stuck in the trap, and one for this where he has a hollow belly. So for the animation, we cast it with like full foam, and with this one, we had to like leave some space for the hands to get in. So this was a separate deer. So that way we cast them twice and then made them. Naomi painted it again twice, and thankfully they were never in the same shot. So even if there were inconsistencies, you would never see it. Now fabricating the sets. So I mainly had three main interior sets that was in that was the workshop that had this bench, and basically where he kind of cuts open all the animals. Then in this, I wanted it to have like a clear path where he walks in and then walks out. He does not touch anything else, and everything else would have like a layer of dust on it, and or like blood splatters and blood on the floor, like basically oil spills kind of a thing. And this was mainly where he did not really enjoy being here, but it was just kind of his job. The next was the machine room. So this again had a very industrial feeling, where the main thing about this room was the machine. Okay. And I had the pipes made, and I basically put in the pipes. They were dressed in later. I did not have like a specific layout for these pipes. Once I framed the camera, and wherever I could like add an interesting pattern or layout, that's what I kind of chose. And then the chair room. So this was also a very important set, as this had like the climax of the and this was his area. This is where he went to relax. So it had to have some like, this was his gramophone and his chair that he really loved, and then maybe he decorated it a bit with some wallpaper, and then you can see a little chessboard at the back, and his belongings over here. So it had to have like this little homely feeling. Also, he did like put like a fake flooring, like a wooden flooring too, in there. So this, he tried to basically make this his little home, and so this was the whole vibe of this set. And after that, we had the trash heap. So with this one, it was a smaller set. I didn't really build this, didn't really build anything specially for it. It was mostly set dressing that I reused a lot of props from different other parts. And then we cast the heart, the deer heart, multiple times, and then added it to the scene, and then a lot of set dressing to sell this shot. So yeah, so basically the way I made the sets for these, you always start with the camera. since you're dealing with physical objects and an actual space and you're trying to match it to your drawings, but a drawing and the actual physical object, there's always a difference. The physical object will always look bigger and weirder sometimes in camera, and also you got to put on the right lens. So one important thing before you start is we make a quick mock-up. These are nothing pretty. It's you're going to like keep cutting it down if it's too tall, or building it up with like more cardboard if it's too short. This process needs to be quick so that you can then use these to start building the actual props. So I have like a small, yeah, over here. Once I had like the main props build, so then I started to get a sense of the whole area, and then I started setting up the shutter opening shot, and then I went in and I put all these extra props in there to basically fill up the scene, and I did not want anything to be distracting, so I art directed everything in there, and then we built it according to how like based on these props. Also, it's nicer to actually use a camera and have like your mock-up process, because you can always cheat perspective. So you can make stuff bigger that's towards camera, the props, just if you don't have enough space. And mostly when you're in school or you're doing like when we did productions in commercials, you're always cheating perspective because you don't have enough space, and you will not always be able to get a big go down or like a shoot area. So it's always nicer like to kind of make some props bigger to kind of to cheat that perspective. And another main thing about the interior sets was the production designer who worked on this, she made the walls all detachable, so they all basically could be moved around, and only some of them kind of had like these main, like this wall had the board on it, the cork board, and the other walls had like some generic features. It wasn't as like so I could reuse them and recycle them for the other shots. And also you could like move the walls in depending on how you want to set up your shot. So that way none of the walls were made like 90 degrees, because since you're kind of trying to cheat the perspective, you can make it look a little more open and more pleasing to the camera and frame your shot better. You have more flexibility if you can move the walls in or out. And then this was the final shot of the shutter opening. Okay. And this was just, so the whole character was put on an extension, and you can see the puppet over here. And the camera was upside down for this shot, because it was basically, we could not mount it from the floor because it was in the way of the light that was casting the shadow on the wall. So for this shot, my DP, I was animating on another shot, so she kind of came up with this idea where we'll just have the whole camera upside down, and that way it gave her more space for her lights. And that's another thing of when you're basically animating or setting up lights and stuff like that, you always got to make sure there's enough space for the animator to stand, because usually we forget that we start putting lights in, and once the frame is set up, and then the animator comes and he'll be like, I have no place to stand. And since in stop motion, you don't want to be kicking lights or in the middle of a shot or when you're like standing over there, you don't want to be touching anything or moving anything by accident. So it's always important to keep that in mind. Okay, I'm gonna play this. It has no sound, so you can just. This is one of my favorite shots in the film, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things where the way the scene was set up. So, 1 second. How do I exit from here? Okay. So, okay, there you go. So this is the way this shot was set up, and you can see there was a camera move as well. So it was on a tripod, which could be adjusted frame by, like you could make really minute adjustments with this head, the tripod head, and that way I got the camera move. At the same time, I was racking focus. So you can see these little tape marks on the. I had basically set up the first frame and the last frame of what I want to move the focus from the boiler to the deer and the guy. So basically moving the focus from one point to the other. And you got to animate it every frame, because in the whole move, you'll kind of basically, if you animated a couple of frames, it'll start to kind of, and also the lens breathes. So you'll see the background kind of getting smaller as you rack focus. So these are like small little things you basically learn along the way. And during this, when I did a test animation, I realized that I had to animate it. And also all camera moves need to be done on ones. If you do it on twos, it will start to jitter or look jerky. So you don't want that. And that's like something good that I had the time to basically do it, do a test animation, do a blocking, and then move on to the final shot. And over here you can see the little fly rig that's holding it. And then the puppet basically had gotten shorter after some of the animation. I guess the wire had kind of like cramped in over here at his, and I did not want to really fight with the puppet at that point. So we just had to put him on like a pedestal so that he could reach the deer on the table. Okay. So in this shot, we used, I used practical lights, and each of these lights had to be animatable, because as you've seen in the film, the lights basically power up. They come on as the machine powers up. And so everything was on a dimmer. And I could control each of these lights and animate them slowly as the shot kind of progresses. Similarly, and you can see the setup of this. So when I was animating this, every time somebody would enter or open the door in the shoot room, the entire set would shake, because we were on wooden flooring. And all these lights would start to shake in the frame, and sometimes it would, and the first frame of these lights and the last frame of the lights would not match, and that's never good when you're taking like blank frames to do like rig cleanups and stuff like that. So I rigged them with aluminum wire, and basically had like this whole setup. Not the best, but it worked. And you can see all the wires that are running to the dimmer. They're all over here. And also, most of these pipes was not stuck to I did not really hot glue them. They were just stuck over there with gaff tape. You can basically fix anything with gaff tape. It's amazing. So most of our stuff was with gaff tape. And another thing I wanted to point out is in once you set up your shot, once your camera is ready before animation, you basically glue down everything. All these little I think they are heart stuff over here, then this box, and little piece that is there on your set floor needs to be glued down with hot glue. Okay, and that's basically the I think set dresses do that. And I had like me and the friend of mine Naomi was did it for most of the film. And after everything is glued down, you take like a blank frame, and then you start animating. You put a puppet in, you start animating it, and then you take it out and take another black frame before you end. So that way it's good for the visual effects guys or for cleanup. So you get like clean plates. Okay, little bit of the prop builds. So this prop was designed by Anna Chow, the one who built all the interior walls and some amazing models for the. She mostly worked on the interior shots. Amazing sculptor, amazing artist. And I made this quick mock-up just to get the size. So you always want to put the mock-up against the puppet to see that everything works out. And you can see a scratch build over here by Paul Rabbit. He was another great team member who built this. And then this is like the final machine that you'll have seen. This was painted by Zoe. And over here you can see Naomi set dressing. So the set dresser's job is to tie everything down and basically try to match the frame to the concept art. I did not have concept art for all my shots. So basically once I was happy with everything, then, sometimes I feel the wall is not, it's too yellow, and maybe put some washes of black on it, or there's not enough dust on this. So we then put some glue and then dust some powder or some sort of dry pastels on it to kind of give the feeling of dust. And anything basically to enhance. Sometimes you got to change some paints because the light, once you put in like lights in there, some of the props kind of get hidden. And if you want to accentuate those, so you kind of put in, you give them like a fresh coat of paint just to change the color a little bit, so it changes from the background. Okay, and this was like just a view of how all the lights were set up and how the shot was set up. So in the previous shot, I had like the machine a little away from the table, and then when I was doing close-up shots, I pulled it closer to the table, so that way I don't have to reach in and animate. It was much easier for me if it was on the corner of the table and I did not have to like kill my back in the whole process. Okay, okay, so this was a hero prop. I actually put a little bayonet bulb, like a holder bulb in there, because I wanted that actual filament to be glowing, and did not want the LEDs were not really doing the job for this. So I did some research and got like these mini bulbs and learned how to solder and got them fitted in the little heart sculpt that was made by Anna. And you can see this shot was animated by another animator, Andres, who is who did amazing, like really subtle animation with the hands. It's really beautiful. Another thing is you see the little blood and stuff falling down. We use something called museum gel. It's really good to use for like water effects or some sort of like gooey material. So that's what we used for the little gooey blood. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is another prop made by Naomi, and you can see in this one, I mean, this prop didn't really have much, but it was kind of important. And then the little sparks were added in post. One thing I tried to stay true to, like, the medium and not do a lot of changes in post. There were very few things I did add. Like, for instance, I added the glasses in post, and that was, and maybe like, and the sparks. Okay, these are some of the other props which are there in the background, and everything was made with extreme detail, because even though it's going to be maybe not in focus, or it's going to be blurred, but it does add a lot to the frame. And it's important to have, like, make every prop in detail. Maybe it can not, like, you don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but it's nice if it has the same, almost the same detail as stuff in that's going to be in focus or in camera. Yeah, another thing is all these junk piles, and they're basically old model kits from eBay. I just got it in bulk, and then one of my team members basically stuck them together with super glue, and then we all painted it to look the same. And this was some of the lights in the shot. These are the gas tanks at the back. Okay, so building the forest set. The forest set was another amazing like build, which had like a lot of detail. Yeah, so again, I start with having the mock-up, moving to the actual trees. And you'll notice that I have the camera in every frame, because the carving of this foam and everything was done by referring to the frame in camera. So if I needed a little change in the topography, I would like look at the frame and kind of add that detail in there. Also, this was made out of resin and fiberglass, because since the puppet was going to be walking on this, and I did not want it, my professor suggested that if we have foam, the puppet will never stay straight and will keep falling. So it was important to have like a hard shell on the areas where he was walking. And this is another detail added in there. And you can see I never completed the entire tree, because it wasn't required. I was never going to see it. And if at all, if I did have to change it for a particular, I could just turn the trees to camera. So that way, never did the entire thing from the back. They're all open. Also, it helped with rigging them. I could just put 2 screws in there with the drill and fix them to the set. So that way the trees never moved. Even if the table did kind of shake, the trees were rock solid. And yeah, weird camera angles. So this was something I thought I should point out. For this shot, since it was like forced perspective, I basically could not get it with the set that I already had. So this was the setup that I did, where I just screwed in the trees onto 2 plates and had little pigeons kind of supporting these planks. And you can see the whole rigging, the lighting done by Laura. Okay. Another, like I was saying before, always leave space for the animator, because if you're going to, sometimes you'll be animating for days, like the walking shot took me about 3 whole days. The first time I animated it, I bumped the camera. The camera moved on the rig on my second day, and I had to start the shot all over again. So it's really uh, disappointing when that happens, but sadly, that's the nature of this medium. And I was happy to do it again because I wanted the shot to look good. And it was one of the opening shots, so it was very important that I get it right. And this shot also had a lot of moving parts. So for that, I had to, I had to practice a lot of times before actually going into the final shoot. Another thing that I learned was I always thought that, oh yeah, if I put 2 cameras and I animate it once, I'll get 2 shots instead of 1. But sadly, that's not how it works. You always animate to camera. Like I remember, I think Ravi and Dhruva had mentioned it in his talk the last time, that because you can see the puppet kind of moving over here. So in camera, it looks like it's straight, but it's actually all wonky on the other side. So, and I didn't realize this because when I was looking at it, you always refer to it on screen on the computer screen, and all your playbacks and all happens on the computer screen. So you don't realize that the puppet is slowly leaning towards you, and by the time you realize that, it's too late. So then you just have to go with the flow and keep animating. This is another thing. For the deer animation, I did like a test. First a 2D thing, a quick 2D thing in Flash, then a quick one on set, and then the final animation you'll have seen in the film. Okay, this is a quick test. Yeah, so since I had a lot of moving parts, the camera was moving, the foreground was moving the opposite direction, and the puppet was moving. So I had to get all of these timings spot on, like correct. So this shot I first practiced by when it was still in the mock-up stage. I did a lot of practice to get all these moving parts kind of timed correctly. Once I had all of this down, then I moved on to building the set and the final animation. Okay, almost coming to the end. So the cleanup and vis effect. Since I told you I wanted to stay true to the stop motion medium, I did not do much of visual effects. Like every background was actually in camera. Everything was in camera except for the glasses. So I did laser cut some of these the lenses for the goggles, but I used to get this glare, and the minute the puppet would move just a little bit, it would go away. So I could not get it consistent, and after fighting with it for a while, I decided to just take off the lenses and do it in post. And my friend Moziar, who did the VisFX work on it, he did an amazing job in kind of adding like a reflection of the background. We sometimes made it up. I just gave him like different stills from the film, and he just kind of added like an HDRI like map which reflected onto the glasses. Yeah, and mostly used for cleaning up the rigs. So the cleaning up the fly rigs, or even any rigs that were there during animation. So all of that was cleaned up using the clean plates. And yeah, and that's the end of the chat.
Yeah.
One thing, sorry.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to add was, like I said, just understanding this was going off from Nikita's and Arvind's talk, where similarly, like where you specialize and be a generalist. So what I found over here was in the stop motion industry, we do have, like in the film industry, they want you to be specialized, even though every person working over there has different skill sets. But when you're applying over there, you need to apply with like a portfolio just that shows one skill set. Like for me, I had to show my model making skills, so all the props and a little bit of molding and casting. Even though at Leica we have a separate team that does that, so I just have to make the prop and then it gets molded and casted by a different team. And puppets are made by a whole like a different team altogether. Even though I enjoyed making the puppets, you know, but they have a whole separate department just for that. Whereas when I was working I worked at Hornet for a couple of projects and a bunch of other studios in New York. Over there, they look for generalists where you can animate or you fabricate or you can do both. So over there they look for people, and every project is a different need. It's similar to how when I was working at Bombay Design House, where we had to basically learn new skills for newer projects. And yeah, so it kind of gave me a similar vibe, except for now, where I'm just working on in one department, and you can see the progress happening in different departments, but at the same time, you're just like kind of concentrating on what you're doing. So yeah, that was it, and thank you so much for listening to me. I think I've gone about over an hour.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you, Bismarck.
So
And like,
yeah,
yeah, that was really good presentation.
good.
Like as a student, I came to learn a lot about stop motion from this presentation. So I think we should move to
Thanks.
Q&A, question and answers.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Should I stop presenting? I'll stop presenting.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So first question is from Rohan Rege, and
Mhm.
he asks, how did you plan the camera movement and also the character animation for the entire shot?
Like I said, I did a blocking. So on bigger projects or commercial projects, they do this thing called pop throughs, where they do an animation on eights, then they do an animation on twos, get it approved, and then they do it on ones. For my film, I was doing most of my animation on twos, except if it did have a camera move in there. So most of the shots were done on ones. So for that, the camera move again was all through pop throughs. I basically started with moving the puppet, not animating it, just moving it from. Okay, it's going to be here. It's going to be in position A in frame one, and this is the focus. And then move it on frame two, frame B, and then move the camera to that, and then see if I need a focus change or how do I need, and then you dress the shot according to both this frame A and frame B, and and then you do a test run to see that everything, like how much you're going to move the frame. Also, like you turn the knob like halfway, or you turn the knob twice, or depending on how much you want to move. And another thing that I did was I added like I was animating points of, say, the nose of the character, or uh, if at all the camera was moving, I used to add like a reference point at the edge of, say, like in in one of the shots I had like a, say, suppose I have a pipe or a knob or anything that is in the frame from frame A, from the first frame to the last frame. I just add like dots and basically animate that moving. So I'm animating the increments between the knob kind of moving out of the frame or moving from left to right, and at the same time doing the same thing with the character. Maybe the character's nose is in frame, so I'm adding points to the nose, and as the camera moves I kind of track and uh, basically add spacing between the first frame of the and the last frame. So that's I hope that really answered the question.
Okay. So next question is from Binod sir, and he asks, would you suggest camera should have power supply or operated through battery? Because in India we don't get cable, like get a cable to have continuous power supply.
Yes, so when we were at Bombay Design House, we used to always be like fighting this, where we'd be like, okay, okay, finish quickly, and we used to be animating blind because of the whole battery issue. And then when I came here, I realized Canon does have uh, a a power supply, and I bought one for the film, and which was a huge help because then I don't have to worry about the battery running out or any of those issues. At the same time, we use this software called Dragon Frame,
Yes,
and
yes.
Dragon Frame basically shows you the live version the entire time. So you can imagine how much power it's basically taking out from the camera. And so having a battery, I mean, a power supply is a must, I would say. But if you do not have that, and also sometimes you can, I'm sure if you do contact like Canon or Nikon, and if they do have, if like basically an interest. So like in our school did talk to Canon, and they basically gave us like camera kits. Like the school bought it, but we kind of worked like a deal with them, I think. And so it was like a good thing to have. But another thing about having the same camera and lenses, I'm just digressing, but um, you never shoot with the same camera body and the same lens. That's something I forgot to mention, is because you don't want the camera body to be talking to the lens. So you always shoot with on commercials. They always shoot with different company lenses with an adapter. So
Mhm.
that way there is no way of the body talking to the camera to the lens, and which would add like a glitch or some sort of would sometimes it has happened where the autocorrect or the autofocus or all these things kind of kick in,
Mhm.
and those spoil the shot in the middle of animation. So that's why you always want to have different camera lenses and a camera body with the power supply.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So next question is from Tanvi, and she asks, "What material did you use for the liquid coming out of the deer?"
Yeah, I like I mentioned before, I used wait, what was it? Museum gel. Yeah, I use museum gel, and the good thing about museum gel is you can add like some sort of you can add like dry pastels or some sort of liquid like translucent coloring. I think inks also work with it, and you can make it the color like for mine. I needed to make it look like oil, so I added black to it, just mixed it in, and over time it sort of starts to, like, when you press it down, it'll get like your fingerprints in it, but over time it like evens out, and it looks like a nice little droplet, or it smooths out with the heat of the lights. So that I think you do get it on Amazon, but yeah, I'm not too sure. But I'm sure there'll be some sort of. You can also use hair gel and mix color in it,
Mhm.
and but the problem with hair gel is it's not animatable. Sometimes you've used Vaseline as well, and again, it's all trial and error. You just try different things, and if it looks good in camera, you can just go ahead and use it.
Yes, sure. Okay, so next question is from Riaz, and he asks, as a stop motion animator and director, I'm sure you've encountered failures in terms of implementing your shots in the manner you had planned before shooting. Even after taking all the care and paying attention to all the details, did you make adjustments, manage, or make correction to the same for your satisfaction?
Yes. Like I said, the 2D drawing and when you actually set it up in camera, it looks very different. And also sometimes the lens sees a lot more than you actually had in mind. Like for instance, when I drew my storyboards in the machine shots, I just drew the parts of the machine like extreme close-ups of the machine parts. But then when I went in to frame my shot, my DP was like, this looks super boring. So I was like, okay, fine. So then we did change the camera angle, and then suddenly I realized I had to animate 10 other things along with that one small little detail of the machine, which again uh, messed up my schedule because then I had to spend more time animating it. But it all worked out, and like it did look good in the end. Also, the shot where the lights were, I had drawn it in a weird. Also, when you draw like uh, animatics and storyboard, you're like just drawing it rough, and you're just throwing it in there. And when you actually start setting it up, when you start setting up the shots, you realize your perspective in your drawing is wrong. And if you set it up that way in camera, it does not look right. So then you have to make changes to it. And at the end of the day, it's what looks good in camera. And if that shot is important, like if that works for your story, then you go ahead with that. If it does not, then you got to keep changing it till it actually works for what you need.
Yes. Okay. So next question is from Ravi, and he asks, when animators are handed out shots, do they do some movement planning in 2D and or maybe refer from photo references? And
Okay.
also adding to that question, do you even act it out first?
Yes. So a lot of animator, like for me, I had done like a 2D and like a test animation, but then for some of the animators do act it out, and they do in Leica or like in the stop motion industry, they call it LAVs, LAV. It's basically live action video, and they do act it out or ask someone to act it out, and then they use that as a reference. They don't really wrote. There's a big difference between using it as a reference and rotoing it. So they never roto it. They look at the reference and they get like slight nuances that you actually do, and you don't realize, like you don't imagine you actually doing that with your face. Okay. And that basically comes out during the live action video, like the reference. And then they choose their moments which they want to add into the character into the animation, and they break it down. So again, the pop throughs, when they're doing it on eights, they kind of add these keyframes, key elements in there. And then when they do it on twos, they practice that again, looking at the live action reference. And then once that is all done and approved, then they do the final animation.
Okay, cool. So, next question is again from Riaz, and he asks, I found the concept of puppet hospital interesting. Could you elaborate on the responsibilities and function of the same? Is there generally such a separate department for every stop motion flick?
So this is a term I've heard during like my time at Leica, and also my professor had mentioned it when he was working on a series. So I'm guessing bigger productions that have like longer, and they are continuously using and churning out animation. So you often don't you cannot keep going to the puppet department while they are making new puppets, and to have like ask them to stop their work and basically concentrate on making your like fixing your puppet that's broken. So they usually have a smaller department from the puppet department. They have like a smaller thing that is closer to stage. so closer to the shoot areas, and they basically do all the fixes, and they're puppet makers, like they know the whole process, so they can easily fix the whatever is wrong with it, unless there's something bigger and then it needs to go back into the puppet department to get fixed. They usually have it for bigger production. I think Stupid Buddy has it, and so does like most of the film productions. And yeah, in like when you're doing commercials, it's so small, you're basically right next to the shoot area, so if anything breaks, you just take it to your desk and fix it. Like we don't have like there is no space to build a puppet hospital, especially. The whole idea is just to have it closer to the shoot areas and have dedicated people working on it so that the others can continue with their tasks.
Okay. And so next question is from Yash, and he asks, as 2D and 3D animation mediums have advantages over each other, does stop motion have an advantage over the 3D medium too?
Sorry, can you repeat that
Yeah, yeah.
question?
As 2D and 3D animation mediums have advantages over each other, does stop
Hmm.
motion also have an advantage over the 3D medium?
Um, all these mediums are very different from each other, I would say. Like stop motion has so many limitations, and you basically use stop motion if your story requires it, and if uh, your story is going to get better in that medium. And you said compared to digital. Wait, I forgot the question.
It was by Yash Rathod. Uh,
Okay.
he basically asked, does stop motion have an advantage over 3D medium?
Oh, yeah. Does it have an advantage? Not really. Those two mediums are separate. You can make it look similar,
Hmm.
but you have to kind of work with um, the limitations that the stop motion medium kind of has to offer. In the 3D animation, you can control everything, but with stop motion, since they are physical objects, you're continuously problem solving and trying to make everything blend in together and look seamless. And so yeah, they both have. I mean, they both have like different limitations, and it mostly depends on your style, I would say.
Okay. So yeah, next question is from Riaz, and he asks, as you said, you wanted to be true to the medium and have pretty much incorporated everything in stop motion. How and when did you plan the effects and which you couldn't or didn't implement in the same?
Oh, so I, as I did tests, I realized what could work and what couldn't work in in camera, and that's when I decided. Also, time was another aspect that played in here. I was like, okay, if I spend so much time, like if I'm spending 1 hour or 20 minutes trying to get those lenses in frame and trying to adjust it, it makes more sense to do it later in post than to actually fight with the puppet and to get the animation on like get the animation done. So it was along the way, and tests are always important, and that's where I realized that there are some things I could do in post or get it fixed, but most of the time I tried to keep things in camera. So yeah.
Yes, okay. So next question is from Tanvi, and she asks, how long did the entire film take from pre-production to the final cut of the film?
Oh wow. It's been so long. Give or take, I think it took about a year and a half. Yeah, including all the breaks and the time that I could not work on it. Yeah, about a year and a half or a little more than that.
So, like, did you
Yeah.
spend every day on it, like a specific time for it every day?
Yeah. Yes, from morning, from the time I woke up till 12 till the building shut, then went home, slept, came back and worked
Oh,
on it again.
wow.
And at the same time, I had uh, we had classes. So since students were working on it, I had to work with their timings as well. And you got to also respect that they all have coursework, and homework to get done. And so everything kind of had to be adjusted according to everyone's timing and schedule. While
Yes, yes.
and I was working on this film on the side while I was taking other classes, but I kind of planned it in such a way that I took every class where I could basically work on my film towards the end. Once I had started on this, I every class, but then at the same time, I had to go and sit in class and like present what I was doing. Sometimes I could like excuse myself and go and work on, which was in another building. So there were times like that, but yeah, also in the middle of all of this, I did work on a CG film, which was a collaborative class. So yeah, that also wasted my. I mean, it did not waste my time, but yeah, it took my time away from this film.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
next, Yash again asks another question, and he's asked, is 3D printing also used more than casting at Leica in model making? Also, is printing
So
used in prop
yeah,
making?
yes. So at Leica, since that is their aesthetic, all the faces are 3D printed.
Mhm.
Okay, like you have seen the numerous making ofs, and also the best part is Leica works with one of the best 3D printing printers, and if there's any like newer machines, they kind of give Leica to check it out and like give them their feedback. And so they have like the best 3D printing technology.
Wow.
And so yes, and that is their aesthetic, to make the faces in 3D printing. For props, since the faces are the number one priority, and yeah, also it's expensive to do it in 3D printing. So it depends on what how much time it's taking versus money. So there are some props which are made using 3D printing, whereas the others, we have a bunch of fantastic like model makers working on it. And yeah, so it's a mix. It depends on uh, yeah, it actually depends on my supervisors, and if it's their call on um the build process. And yeah, so that kind of governs whether it's going to be done made by hand, or if it's going to be made by the if it's going to be 3D printed. But then eventually, after it's 3D printed, it comes back down, and then we got to clean it because it prints in layers. So you got to process it even after that, and then it goes to the mold room, and then you make multiples of it. So because we always make multiple sets, and so that way eventually it does go to the mold room, and you make molds and casts of it. So yeah, it's a balance between time and money, and even detail. Like some of the things might need more detail, and if it's easier or quicker to do it in a 3D model and print it, so that way, that's when that call's taken.
Oh, nice. So, yeah, next question is from Arvind. So he says, hi Bismarck, loved your process and presentation. Did you plan your
Okay.
animation? Did rough test in 2D or 3D before going ahead? with animating the puppet?
Yeah, so the for a couple of shots I did, like I showed you the deer shots, and not really for the walk, just the deer shot, because I was basically animating like a quadruped for the first time, and I don't animate as much in CG. So most of my I rely on in 2D, and the pop throughs and maybe live action videos was mainly my references and not CG.
Hmm. Okay. So next question is from Malvika, and she asks, "How do you control and animate light in stop motion when the changes are gradual and slow, or is it done in post production entirely?"
So I had a dimmer that was connected to all the lights, and that basically helped with controlling the lights and animating it. And again, like I put like a little tape, and I decided my increments of how much I'm going to, animate it, like if the light's powering up. So I had like a little tape on the knob, and I was basically using that as my reference of how to animate the lights. And similarly, every light in there basically was on a dimmer, and that's how I animated it. uh, so is it done? Yeah. So a lot of lights also. We did have a snoot. So my DP kind of put a snoot on some of the, like the heart in some shots. The practical light was not enough. So for that we used an LED with a snoot just to kind of enhance the light. And thankfully those LEDs too had like a dimmer on it, like a adjusting knob, so I could change the intensity on that and kind of animate those together as the frames progressed.
Okay. Also,
Yeah.
like these lights usually heat up very quickly. So how do you tackle that?
So yeah, so LEDs don't heat up,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's nice. But the actual tungsten lights, which have like a bulb in it, those get really hot. So you gotta one thing, like it's just your bad luck if a bulb goes off in the middle of your shot,
Mm-hmm.
and if you change the bulb, sometimes the newer bulb burns with a higher intensity than the older one.
Oh, yeah.
So that could add like a jump in your animation. So then that's just your luck where you would have to change, like just restart the entire shot. But um yeah, you need an AC in most of these. Like you're sweating, and also we usually wear black when we're animating because your clothes sometimes cast reflections, and if you're wearing colored clothes, kind of reflect, and it
Mm-hmm.
starts to jitter onto the props. So it's always nicer to wear black, so that way you you reduce the amount of reflection on the set, and that just gets like really intense and hot during, like, because those lights are like, now a good thing is you get really good powerful lights that are LEDs,
Mm-hmm.
and it really helps because you like I said, you can, with these LEDs you can change the frequency, which changes the color of the lights. So you don't use gels either. But sadly, those lights are not as powerful as the LED lights are not as powerful as the original RE lights, the older lights. So yeah, it's like yeah, which one's better kind of a thing,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so moving on to next question. So next question is from Tanvi, and she asks, "Stop motion industry is known to be gig to gig. Should it be considered as huge complication?
It's yeah. I mean, I don't really get the question, but most of the time, yeah, there are periods where you have to like there are times where you're like looking for jobs and there are not many jobs available, but thankfully when like projects do come by, it helps with like you know mostly in this industry it's like word of mouth. It's like you do well on in one project and then somebody goes and tells another company and those guys are like, hey, I worked with this guy on a previous project and he's really good, or it's nice to work with him or her, and they um, they would hire you. And it's at the same time it's good to have other skills to keep yourself busy during projects which like during non-stop motion projects. And there are some people who don't really require that because they keep getting hired from one project to the other, but at the same time there are sometimes you are stuck with like a period where there are no projects, so you got to work on something else. Like, so it's good to have like other skills while you're waiting for those projects to come by.
Yeah. Okay. So next question is from Arvind, and he asks, any advice for someone planning a new stop motion project? What was the biggest takeaway from your film and work so far?
Oh wow, this is a huge question, Arvind. Okay, huge takeaway. No. If you can make two puppets, like for the guy, I realized in like mid uh, way I should have made more main character puppet because he was practically in all the scenes. So yeah, I just there were many lessons learned, and even now when I'm after finishing my film and after working on ads and also now my time at Leica, there are so many things you learn every day, and you'll be like, I wish I knew that when I was working on my film. But I would say because of my professor and his guidance, I had like a very good start. The way I like the whole team executed this film, it was it was almost on par with how things are done in the industry. And when we went when any of us started working, like when my team members and all of us, it was when we started like working in studios or even on commercial gigs, nothing they did over there was new, or like yeah a few things were new, but the ideology or the process was always similar, and with a few changes, like things on the east coast is done differently, and things on the west coast, like there are some materials they called like are named differently, or they do some processes in a different way. So yeah, you do have to pick up these things along the way, but other than that the foundation was really good and nothing was new. You always kind of knew what was happening. So um, yeah, the process was pretty strong, I would say. But yeah, there were many things like I mentioned during the presentation, like making two puppets, or what else? Yeah, I mean, most of it was like I did. I did have time to make up for any mistakes that I learned along the way. And again, since in stop motion and actually any animation medium, um, it's all problem solving. You you get like a problem comes up, and then you just figure out how to deal with it. And yeah, next time, yeah, we just like kind of pay attention to it and fix it the next time. I hope that answered your question. It was kind of like really, it was a huge question, Arvind. So yeah, and mostly what I explained in the presentation was almost how it's all done. So it's not, it's almost the same. So if you follow this process, it would like, it would help.
Okay.
And it depends on project to project again. Like every new project comes up with a whole new set of problems. So you just got to know how to fix it.
Hmm.
Research and trial and error and uh, testing. Yeah.
Okay, so now Riaz has a follow-up question, and he asks, could you explain the aspect about you changing your medium from stop motion to other forms with an example where you tried the former but later switched to the latter medium due to that part not working in stop motion?
Huh. Okay. With respect to my film, follow up, blah blah blah. Other forms. Okay, like I said, the one example that I can think of is the glasses. I did, like I said, I did cut laser cut like lenses for his goggles, and then I needed to take out those lenses to reach into it and kind of move the eyeballs. Okay, so with that whole process, it started to get really tedious, and my fingerprints were on the lenses, and which was in like visible in camera. There was a glare from the light, which was not really. One time it used to fall on one lens only. Sometimes it used to be on both, and with the character animating and the head moving, I unless I had the light attached to the puppet and both of them moved together, I wouldn't have been able to like do it with a light on a separate stand. So that's when I decided to do it in post. And basically, I went in and masked out the goggles like area, and then my the VisFX artist Mosier, he basically took that information, the masked out area, as paths and put in a glass texture on top of it and a reflection. So I hope that answers your question. But other than that, there were some instances where, okay. So for the part where the puppet goes and throws the dead heart onto the trash, the bin. So in that, when I animated, when the shot was animated, um, I think my professor was like, "It'd be nice if you have like a little spark as the bulb kind of hits the pile of the other hearts. You know, like a little kind of energy still left in there." So that was later added in post because the shot was already done and there was no way to go back because the sets were already taken down. It would have to be like redo all, like put up all the sets again, redress it. And so, yeah, that's another example where I kind of added that stuff in post. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was all the questions we had today. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so thank you very much for coming today for the talk. And so before closing the session, can we watch the
Hmm.
film again? The
Oh, yeah.
so there
Sure.
is another
Oh,
question
we have
by
another question. Yeah.
which material did you use
Which
for
was.
aluminum wire? Since I have had experience where aluminum wire is malleable and breaks after 20 twists or turns.
Yes. So basically, it's like I figured out if you do support the wire when you're animating, okay, it does last longer. Also, using sometimes some armatures have multiple wires, like you can twist. Say, for instance, this over here has like this is a 1/8 wire. I'm sure over here we use a imperial system, so it's all in inches, and maybe this is about like 3 mm aluminum wire. So it's the way you support. Whenever you're twisting, you never want to go like you never want to bend it this way. You always want to hold it on both the ends and then slowly massage the wire into how you want to bend it, and that basically helps prolong the life of the wire. And yeah, and like yeah, some you don't have control over it, especially when it's already inside the material and under the clothes and all of that. But you usually have a sense of where the joint is going to be, and you want to hold on to that joint and like gently kind of move it into place. So that might help, or use multiple wires, but then that would add more tension onto your puppet joints and might be difficult to bend. So it's like which one works better. Also, if it's a heavier puppet, you want to use a heavier gauge wire. And yeah, it depends on the puppet design, honestly. Sometimes it could be the puppet design that and the wrong wire that's being used, or yeah, the way the wire kind of runs into, say, suppose it's getting it keeps hitting like this point which is making it break inside the armature, so that also could be an issue. So I'll have to see the design, or basically use a thicker gauge.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll end this session now. And thank you so much for coming
Okay.
and for your
Yeah, thank you
presentation.
for having me.
Yeah. And I also would like to thank all the viewers who came today and with their questions. And yeah. So thank you again. And I'll end the stream now.
Thanks.